I never thought my world would shatter the way it did that evening. The moment I found out, it was as if the air had been stolen from my lungs, leaving behind a hollow, aching space in my chest. Love, trust, everything we had built together, crumbled beneath the weight of a truth I had never prepared myself to face. But even before that moment, the signs had been there, subtle yet persistent. I had always prided myself on knowing him, on understanding the unspoken language of his sighs, his laughter, the way his eyes softened when he looked at me. And yet, somewhere along the way, that language had started to change, morphing into something foreign, something I couldn't quite decipher. It wasn't in the dramatic revelation of whispered confessions or hurried explanations. No, it was the quiet moments, the ones where his absence spoke louder than his presence. The stolen glances at a screen turned away from me, the scent of a foreign perfume lingering in the fabric of his clothes. 1,000 tiny betrayals, invisible yet devastating, each one chipping away at the foundation of what I believed was unshakable. I convinced myself I was imagining things. Love does that to you. It makes you blind in the cruelest of ways, painting over the cracks until you can no longer tell where the illusion ends and the truth begins. I buried my doubts beneath the weight of my devotion, choosing to believe in us rather than acknowledge the growing distance between us. Then the night stretched longer. His touch felt hesitant, almost absent-minded. Conversations became short and perfunctory, devoid of the laughter and warmth we had once shared. I would reach for his hand and he would pull away too quickly, as if my touch burned him. And still I told myself it was nothing. That we were just going through a phase, that life had gotten too busy, that love didn't always feel like fire. It sometimes felt like embers, glowing quietly beneath the surface. Denial is a strange kind of comfort. It allows you to exist in a world of half-truths, where the fear of losing something is greater than the pain of knowing it is already gone. So, I clung to the version of him that lived in my mind, to the love I thought we still shared, refusing to see the reality unfolding before me. Until that evening when the final veil lifted and I was forced to confront the truth I had so desperately tried to ignore. It didn't come as an explosion but as a whisper, a realization so quiet, yet so deafening, that it shattered every illusion I had built around us. And in that moment I understood. I had already lost him long before I knew it. The days that followed felt like a slow unraveling. The walls of our home, once filled with warmth, became hollow echoes of the life we had built together. The silence between us was no longer companionable but suffocating, an unspoken testament to the distance that had wedged itself between us. I found myself observing him more closely than ever before, dissecting every movement, every glance, every sigh that escaped his lips. There was a carefulness in the way he carried himself now, as if walking on the fragile ice of his own guilt. When he spoke, his voice was softer, weighted with something I couldn't quite name, pity perhaps, or regret. But he never admitted to anything. The truth lingered in the spaces between his words, in the hesitations that punctuated our conversations. And I, still desperate to hold on to what was left, let those silences speak for themselves, filling in the gaps with my own assumptions, my own fears. Nights were the hardest. Lying beside him, I felt like a stranger in my own bed. I could hear his breathing, steady and calm, while mine came in shallow gasps, as if my body refused to accept the reality of what I knew. I would reach for him in the darkness, my fingers brushing against his, hoping, praying that he would turn toward me, pull me close, tell me that I was wrong, that I was imagining things. But he never did. And in that stillness I knew I was mourning something that was already gone. Denial had carried me for so long, but grief would not be ignored. It crept into the corners of my days, an unwanted shadow lurking beneath every forced smile, every carefully composed expression. I could no longer pretend that the life we had built was intact. The cracks had widened, the walls trembling under the weight of secrets unspoken. One evening, as the sun dipped beneath the horizon, I found myself sitting at the kitchen table, staring at the empty chair across from me. He was late again. Lately, his absences had become a pattern. each one stretching longer than the last. I had stopped asking where he was, stopped expecting excuses that only deepened my hurt. I traced the rim of my untouched coffee cup, my fingers trembling slightly. The silence was unbearable, thick with the weight of everything we weren't saying. I wanted to scream, to demand the truth from his lips, but I was afraid. Afraid of what he would say, of what I already knew in my heart. The sound of the front door opening jolted me from my thoughts. He walked in, his expression unreadable, his movements careful. For a fleeting moment I thought he might say something, offer an explanation, an apology, anything. But he merely nodded, his gaze avoiding mine, and disappeared into the other room. That was the moment I realized. This was no longer a home. It was a place we inhabited separately, bound only by history and an unspoken reluctance to let go. And as much as I feared the unknown, I feared staying in this hollow existence even more. The weight of silence was unbearable. Each passing day felt heavier, the unspoken words pressing against my chest, threatening to suffocate me. I could no longer live in this limbo, caught between love and betrayal, between hope and the inevitable truth. One evening as I stood in the dim light of our bedroom, I spoke his name. He turned, startled, as if he had forgotten I existed in his world. I met his gaze, searching for something, remorse, honesty, anything to tell me that what we had was still worth saving. "Are you in love with her?" The words left my lips before I could stop them, trembling and raw. His silence was my answer. Something inside me shattered, but this time I did not try to hold the pieces together. I let them fall. The days that followed were painful but necessary. I packed my bags not because I had to, but because I chose to. I refused to stay in a place where love had turned to ghosts. Walking away wasn't easy, but it was the bravest thing I had ever done. Time became my ally. Each passing day I felt lighter. I learned to rediscover myself, to embrace the solitude that once scared me. In that stillness I found strength. I found peace. And most importantly, I found myself again.